So Young, the Israel Hamas Palestine situation has gotten worse by the day. More death tolls. What do you think about this whole thing?
The death toll is one thing. The number of civilian casualties is another. I think also there's the involvement or possible involvement. There's already skirmishes going on from across the border from Hezbollah. I believe that this can snowball into something much bigger, more of a religious affair where, it's already a religious affair. The fact of the matter is that it's in an area which is very mentioned many times in the Bible.
Of course, yeah. Israel is...
it's sort of the capital. It's like the Disneyland of all religions, when you think about it. And, while all of this is happening, there's also what's going on in Ukraine. So I'm just gearing up for World War III.
Okay. So this came out 25 minutes ago from the New York Times, a left-wing paper. But here it says, Israel says it has isolated Gaza City after large attack. So this whole thing started because, was it October 7th, right?
Yeah.
October 7th when Hamas invaded Israel, kidnapped children, women. I think we shouldn't forget that. So that's
they were talking
started,
about
right?
the link between North Korea and Hamas from that attack, how they used they're not parachutes, parasails?
You mean the paraglide?
Yeah, that's kind of something that apparently the North Korean forces use a lot and practice a lot. They were saying that maybe some training was shared with them too.
So a couple weeks ago, we heard from a pro-Palestine Lebanese lawyer, and today we have pro-Israel side. We have to hear both sides, and we want to hear from Israel side of the story. We have Rabbi Abraham Cooper here. How you doing, sir?
Pleasure.
Hello,
Good to
Rabbi.
be here. Yeah, I came all the way from the west side, so it's nice to be in Koreatown.
Yeah, so Rabbi Cooper, he's a chairman for U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. And also from Simon Wiesenthal Center, he's a Global Social Action Associate Dean Director. Did I have it all correct, sir?
Sounds good.
Okay. So you see all these college campuses. I see more like pro-Palestine protesting these days. Initially, it was all pro-Israel, mainstream media. I don't necessarily think New York Times, Washington Post, CNN used to be pro-Israel. I always felt they were a little bit more pro-Palestine. I might be wrong. If you think I'm wrong, you can correct me. But why do you think the narrative is shifting?
Yeah, well, you've touched on about 6 or 7 major issues. So let's maybe take a half a step back. Okay. There have been so many skirmishes between Hamas and Israel over these past few years that I think for some people, including some very powerful people at the United Nations, they just view this as the next skirmish between Hamas and Israel. But for us Jews, what happened on October 7th was a totally different incident, which you had the targeting of innocent women, children, the elderly, burning families in their homes, executing children in front of their parents, and vice versa. This was a game plan that was orchestrated from the Iranian regime, probably paid for by them, but the level of brutality, a sustained brutality that left the single largest death toll in a violent attack on Jews since the end of World War II, since the end of the Nazi Holocaust. So it's important, although many people don't want to go back all the way to October 7th, to understand that what transpired that day and what happened to the Jewish people as a result has changed everything. If you don't get that basic point, it's hard to follow what's going on. On October 6th, Jews in Israel, they were fighting with each other, political differences, religious differences, bickering, protests, get rid of Bibi.
Jews in Palestine, you're saying?
No, this is just internal.
Oh, internal.
Okay. Always, fighting, with each other. Here in the diaspora, 2 Jews, 3 opinions.
I heard about that.
Always.
So, like,
but what happened?
liberals, right?
But what happened on that day? All of those differences completely melted away. And when Prime Minister Netanyahu announced this time to take a look and see how this could have happened, but right now we have to get rid of Hamas once and for all. So from the point of view of the Jewish people around the world, this was a war to go get the people who put babies in ovens, who decapitated among 40 infants that they murdered in one spot, decapitated some of them, the murder of 260 people who were at a peace concert, the rape of women, the kidnap, the hostage taking. It's a kind of full list of crimes against humanity. This is not something that the Jewish people in the 21st century are ready to absorb, negotiate, don't do it again. This was a declaration on every single Jew. Mm-hmm. And what happened in the days immediately following, as you can imagine, I do a lot of interviews with media around the world. So I noticed that in some of the interviews I did from Europe, the journalists were quite honest. They said, look, my sympathies are with the Palestinians. They're the underdog, and they should have their own state, maybe 2-state solution. But I didn't sign on for this. Mm-hmm. And what we expected, I'm speaking now for myself, but I think for most people, that would have been the reaction of many Palestinians, which is, I want my own state, but what just happened shouldn't happen to anyone. And we didn't hear that. Mm-hmm. So what you have now is a total commitment on the part of the people of Israel to eliminate Hamas. At the same time, Israeli military knows that a Jewish state is not going to drop a nuclear bomb, even if somebody says they should. They're not going to carpet bomb a relatively small area, and whoever gets killed, gets killed. They have to go after the head of the fish, who right now, as we speak, is hiding underneath, again, a hospital in Gaza and connected to 300 miles of tunnels under the Gaza Strip. And that's one of the reasons it's going to take Israel a long time. For the United States, if they had a similar piece of territory after something like that happened, 3 B-52s unload, and that's the end of the issue. And also, just one last thing to try to put it into perspective, I don't have the Korean population figures, but for Israel, 1,400 people who were murdered, that is the equivalent of about 39,000 Americans killed in one day by one terrorist group. So just slot in the figures in any country, and you'll understand that this isn't just another skirmish between Israelis and Palestinians. That, just to give it its, if you will, its basic context.
I think when you look at some of the history of regional conflicts in each territory, it goes very deep under the skin and in the culture as well. I agree with you 100% that those were atrocities performed by Hamas, and I don't think it should ever happen again. But we do interview also Palestinians. We do see outside reports that come out, and many Palestinians would actually say that that didn't happen. Where is the proof? And for example, there were some articles pointing to the fact that, in fact, there were no actual evidence of beheaded babies, but it was something that I think really shook the hearts of everyone. What would you say about that?
Well, I represent an organization called the Simon Wiesenthal Center, which is all about the memory of the Holocaust. And I don't think I ever in my life would have said that maybe there are people that are worse than the Nazis. Mr. Wiesenthal was a victim and then spent the rest of his life bringing people before the bar of justice, about 1,100 cases. A lot of that, you might say, symbolic justice. One of the reasons it was so difficult in these cases is that the Nazis worked so hard to cover up their crimes, to erase the evidence, to kill anybody, get rid of a paper trail, or kill anybody who could be a witness. In this case, you're absolutely right. You say, how can you prove it? You can prove it because Hamas broadcast their atrocities. They put them on live stream. They video. They use their iPhones. They made calls to their parents. Oh, I'm going to get $10,000 a head, and I murdered 10 Israelis. Calling the father to be proud of what it is that they did. So you have two things. Number one, the video evidence of the perpetrators themselves celebrating their atrocities, something that the Nazis themselves never did. Secondly, I don't know if it's in this morning's paper, but if you look at the Wall Street Journal, very long essay on the people who have to look at the remains of some of those, and I think there are still 300 victims that are not yet identified because they were burned to death or other things that were done, decapitated, etc. I think that at the end of the day, this is not about propaganda. This is about a group with the support of the Iranian regime that wanted to do this. In fact, there is now evidence that the original target date for this attack would have been the first night of Passover, when families would be together. And it was delayed because the Iranian regime was negotiating with the Americans to get the $6 billion that had been frozen. So they felt maybe it should be a little bit delayed. This is a case of atrocities in that they have the evidence. And when you take a look at what that evidence was, what the goal was, and what they would still plan to do if they're allowed to continue that kind of behavior, this ranks among the worst crimes against humanity. Now, let me also say that I go to the Middle East very often. I was just in Israel about 3 months ago. Whenever I go, I meet with Palestinians as well as Israelis. I have 8 grandchildren in Jerusalem. My goal is I want them to live in peace. I think that's a priority. And there are plenty of normals among the Palestinians. Take a look at the Palestinians who live outside of the Middle East. Well-educated, usually very successful. They have a problem internally in which they get to choose between a corrupt Palestinian authority that rips off most of the international aid that comes in to give to their own top tier, and Hamas, which has proven itself to be, mass murdering group. And they originally got a lot of votes in Gaza, which they were voted in an open election. Jimmy Carter went there and said it was a free election. I think in many ways as a protest vote against Abbas and his cronies in the Palestinian Authority. So, but I think there's one other thing. You're right. Things run very deep. For the Jewish people, it's 3,500 years in the Holy Land. For Jews, for Christians, for Muslims, of course. But I also was a little bit involved in the years leading up to the Abraham Accords in Bahrain, in the United Arab Emirates. And I saw with my own eyes that when you take the extra step to go beyond the stereotype you have, to meet the other, in this case, these were societies, these were people, leaders, who their number one fear was not Israel, but Iran. So they had an existential issue where they knew they needed as much help as possible. But then also, they just said, well, why should we be at war with Israel? If Israel has the technology and the drive and the know-how, and we could, work together we could become stronger and safer, why not? So I think the combination of ingredients that when you can break through the stereotypes, if you have a willing partner at the other end, you can see how fast those old views that if you don't take care of the Palestinian issue, there'll never be peace, turn out to be false. I think that there's still, at the end of the day, someday there will be peace when we have an appropriate partner who's interested in peace. It means that neither side is going to get everything that it wants, but until now, the Palestinian leadership and also utilizing UNRWA schools and all the rest, they just keep giving the next generation of kids a steady diet of, those Israelis, your neighbors, they have no connection to this land. They came and took away, your grandparents' place, and we have to go and liberate it sometime. They have none of their textbooks even shows a map of Israel. If you're looking on a map, they'll come up with names for Haifa or Tel Aviv, that it gives them the impression that
it's not supposed to even exist.
Well, it shouldn't exist.
It's the propaganda that they're sending,
right? And that although you have the internet today, and a lot of young people can learn a lot more. It's not like once upon a time where, let's say, during the 1950s with Nasser in Egypt, you had one or two newspapers and the newsreels all controlled by a government. Today, if you want to learn more, you can. But more than that is that Palestinians and Israelis do know each other. They do have daily contact in many, many places. The problem is that the narrative that's been foisted on Palestinians is not a narrative of peace. It's a narrative of war. I don't know that much about North Korea and South Korea, although I've been to South Korea 5 or 6 times, and I'm involved with North Korean Freedom Coalition for 30 years already. It's an issue of importance. The Korean people deserve to live in peace. I've had some involvement both, less in Korea, but also in Japan on the disappeared, the kidnapped people, the separated families. The amount of personal suffering and tragedy in so many millions of families, it's not a natural state for a nation to be divided. So, of course.
You're right, it was the UN.
Yes, whatever it is that may have originally...
it wasn't divided in the first place.
MacArthur wanted to take over, but...
Yeah, you can, again, if you'll have 4 historians here, they'll come up with 5 narratives. But the bottom line is that right now, you have, that 2 societies, that two parts of a family that are separated, and at the end of the day, that has to be corrected.
Mm-hmm. Rabbi Cooper, I have a question. You said you believe that Iran was behind Hamas attack. I think you premised that.
Biden messed up.
So I wanted to ask about this because the timing is kind of funny. Right before that news, people were talking about people who try to find real news, not the mainstream media. They were talking about, so South Korea comes into the picture. The $6 billion that was frozen because South Korea imported oil from Iran. And President Biden wanted South Korea to unfreeze that money. And it's right about that time, after weeks later, we have this attack. Do you see some kind of correlation to this, or what do you think? And what is your proof that Iran is behind, or Hezbollah is behind?
They said they didn't spend any of the money, right?
I can't. I'm not a conspiracy buff. I would just say the following: there's no question that the Iranian regime, when you take a look at see how Hamas deployed, it has the Iranian fingerprints all over it. And in terms of the monies that's needed, to find the experts who can also help with the tunnels and the missiles, et cetera, there's no question that at the end of the day, the puppet masters here are the Iranians. Now, parallel to all of this, of course, is President Obama. When he came to office, he gave a famous speech in Cairo in which he posited the theory that there is a way to moderate the Muslim Brotherhood and different extremists in the Middle East and have them play a central role in a stable,
he did give them
a stable,
I remember.
and in many ways, this mindset continued with a 4-year detour under Trump, but continued as soon as the former
Vice President
became
the White House.
president, and put the same cast of characters back in play, who now turn out probably were in cahoots with the Iranians the entire time. Look, Bibi Netanyahu actually came to a joint session of Congress and warned them, you know, you're going to give the ability for the Iranians to deliver nuclear weapons against their neighbors. This is going to be disastrous. Later on, you remember that he had the Mossad lift an entire building that had all of the documents from the Iranian nuclear program. So all of the power players knew the truth, but at a certain stage, it became clear that the Iranians didn't want to make peace with America. Mm-hmm. They wanted to show America as being weak. And so by just running the clock and negotiating, while at the same time breaking every single rule and going forward with their missile capabilities, with their nuclear development, yeah, they had to go a little bit slower. They paid a huge economic price. But that was all coming off. And finally, I think the United States realized that they weren't going to get anything for this deal.
No, it's a stupid deal. It didn't make sense at all. And they have like self-inspection. America's not allowed to inspect them. I think North
sounds a lot like
America.
North Korea.
And
Yeah, everything that you were saying is like,
let's just say
a lot
that,
like North Korea. And they're friends too.
Yes, let's just say that if there were Olympics in lying, so I would say that I can't just say 3, but I would say leading the league would be Iran, North Korea, China, and perhaps Russia.
Yeah.
Okay, so if where lying is an art form, and telling the truth is like a multiple choice question, you just say whatever it is that you want to say, and for people who are coming from democracies, where our mindset is, okay, let's be reasonable, let's discuss, let's negotiate. You can discuss, negotiate if you have the strongest stick.
But didn't America also kind of hurt itself when we were American government was the one who claimed that Iraq has weapons of mass
Yes.
destruction and so many casualties
and they
there.
didn't find anything.
So it's like United States doesn't have the moral high ground anymore.
Yeah, they made, after 9/11, they made a lot of, in retrospect, a lot of wrong decisions. You might even say stupid decisions. And as we speak today, earlier today, there was a cruise missile launched from Iraq headed towards Israel.
Yeah, it's
So
the whole area.
When the Iranians have, they're deep into the Iraqi situation as well. They have a lot of impact there. They control a lot of the groups that are there. And I always wonder, what our veterans think of everything that they did. People felt that they were going to Iraq in order to make sure there wouldn't be another 9/11. And here we are in 2023. We're all worried about, God forbid, another 9/11 for a lot of aspects. But I will say one other thing that is important. The big game changer so far that the Iranians never thought would happen is that the President of the United States dispatched the U.S. Navy to the Mediterranean. Mm. That is a block, a serious block, in which I think it would explain why there is enough death and destruction in northern Israel and in southern Lebanon right now. It's nothing compared to what a full-scale military confrontation would be. And I think that if, God forbid, that ever happened, that the next step wouldn't only be to knock out the 150,000 missiles that Hezbollah has in southern Lebanon, which can destroy whole sections of the state of Israel. But the next step, I believe the Iranians have been told, if you unleash your lackey, you're going to first of all see Lebanon mostly destroyed. Mm-hmm. And number two is, we're not going to we'll leave Lebanon to the Israelis. You do that, we're coming after you. And right now, that's sort of where things are at, but it's it's one thing to play a board game called Risk. Yeah. It's another thing to see it being played out in real time, in reality.
I'm going to have a follow-up question to that in just a second, but you mentioned 9/11 as well. When I was watching coverage of this terrible incident, it reminded me 100% of 9/11 because it struck right in the heart, and it was a huge attack, right? And at the same time, I was watching a lot of reports, both sides, and I just want to play devil's advocate because when you speak with the Palestinian people, they're telling the story exactly as you told in the Israeli side of the story. So it feels like, everyone has like this thing, like we like tried to set a deal, but you guys rejected it. And you say the same thing as well. How much do you think media has a role in playing this sort of propaganda game where it seems like these people at the same time, they believe 100% wholeheartedly that they tried their best, and that's what I'm seeing.
It's really hard to
find. And there is
truth.
disinformation going on one way or another. And there's a lot of it going around. How do you think this plays into this whole thing?
Well, again, there are, I think, two different issues that you raised. They're related, but they are different.
Yeah.
Number one, Israeli soldiers don't go around killing babies on purpose, raping women, or mass murdering innocent civilians. They just don't. Maybe that's what the rest of the world would like them to do, so they can then just be treated like any other
That's
crew.
exactly what the Lebanese lawyer said, right? A couple of weeks ago, he said exactly the same thing, saying that what Hamas did to Israel, Israel did to them in Gaza Strip and West. And I never seen any report. I told him to send me some articles.
That is the kind of brainwashing and propaganda.
So he's misinformed.
He is misinformed. I also think that a Lebanese, a lawyer from Lebanon, can't really speak.
Let me
just say,
that's a very good point.
Can't really speak the whole truth because right now the strongest player in Lebanon is Hezbollah. And there's something called facial recognition. And anybody who's a Lebanese here who would say, well, it's all Hezbollah's fault and they have loved ones in Lebanon, I think they would probably be rather nervous. So that doesn't mean that Israel hasn't made huge mistakes, et cetera, but if you just want to take Gaza in isolation, Israel, from Arik Sharon, who was their number one war hero for over 2 wars, gifted the Gaza Strip to the Palestinian people, removed 9,000 Israelis from their communities, and said, here are the keys, show us what you guys can do with it. Mm. There's no way around the fact that they're the ones, unfortunately, who voted in Hamas. A lot of people did that vote because they were protesting the corruption of the Palestinian Authority. But there is no way of escaping the fact that Israel handed over a piece of land and said, show us what you can do. And on October 7th, Hamas showed them what they would do with the rest of Israel, given the choice. So there's no more negotiating with an entity like that. There just isn't. Now what you have is thousands of Hamas terrorists underground, underneath all the hospitals, and in all the other rounds beforehand, Israel said, well, we can't do this, we can't do that, so we're going to have to let the head of the fish walk away.
Like ambulances, right? I heard that they are actively using ambulances.
So it is.
Hamas.
But then the second question that you ask, is what about the media? And I think there are a few things. One, in Europe, over the last 15, 20 years, where you have also, for the most part, especially in the early years, government-sponsored media, right? In the UK, in France, in Germany, in Austria, in Italy, etc. Things are different today. There are probably more independent outlets. But the undertone, when they reported about what was going on between the Israelis and the Palestinians, was a decision made that the Palestinians are the underdog and the Israelis are the brutes. And you do that and you continue to inculcate it. And then when there have been, probably going back 10 years ago already, some studies done in Germany, but I think it's actually pretty deeply embedded now, in which many millions of Europeans believe that what the Nazis did to the Jews in the 30s and 40s, the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians today. So if you depict Israel like Nazis, what do you do with Nazis? You kill them. You oppose them. So the poisoning of the image and the attitudes towards the Jewish state didn't happen overnight. And part of what has happened to a certain extent is that the brutality, as broadcast by Hamas itself, the brutalities that they heaped on innocent women and children. As we speak, there are 32 kids who are still being held a month later as hostages. It's beyond. It's not even medieval. It is so fundamentally evil that it's the only thing that the Palestinians, when they go out and protest now, since they've adopted the Hamas narrative, is no. It's the Israelis who are guilty of genocide. They're the ones who are guilty of crimes against humanity. They just have to continue to say that narrative, because otherwise they would have to confront the bitter truth that they're stuck between a corrupt Palestinian Authority and a genocidal Hamas. Yes. That's the reality. For the people who are not evil, for the Palestinians who are caught in the middle of all of this, they don't have many options right now. And if the United States, if the UN, if the EU really wanted to help, they would stop funding the Palestinian Authority. They would start funding directly projects that'll help the Palestinian people, and to find the normals, as I would call them. There are. I know them. I meet them all the time. You meet them where? In Palestine? In Israel, when I go to Jerusalem. Israel, did you go to Gaza Strip, or did you go to West Bank to meet these Palestinians? Well, I did go to Gaza Strip in 1989. You can't go anymore. You were talking about 3 months ago. You met a Palestinian boy there. I invited him over to the, Israel's a tiny place, the size of New Jersey, right? But people who live in East Jerusalem, they can go anywhere they want. So we had a lunch at the David Citadel Hotel in West Jerusalem. You walk 3 blocks, you're in the Old City. You walk 5 blocks, you're in East Jerusalem. So, for people not familiar with the geography, it sounds like, wow, it's the situation is it's so intimate, it's so close. We're this close to, if you will, to peace. But I don't think it's a matter really so much anymore of territory. It's a matter of psychology, about whether or not people are prepared to live with each other in peace. But the Israelis are not fools, and they're not going to take any more chances like the way, their prime minister gave away Gaza. No, they have to go in right now, and they have to root out the evildoers. You think they're going to go all in? They're going to go. No Israeli government will ever be formed now that doesn't do that. So does Benjamin Netanyahu, is he getting that much support? Because the media is saying that he's unpopular. He's a pro-defense, and he allowed this to happen. He's extremely unpopular. And the day after this is all over, in my humble opinion, the entire senior leadership of that government is history. They're out.
You think they're out? Oh, okay.
What do you have a government for? It's there to protect you. So it's like the day after 9/11. First you go after the perpetrators, and then you say, well, wait a second. Let's look at the intelligence failures. Where does the buck stop? Where were the failures? Israelis are very tough that way, but you need to understand that where Israelis are at right now, there's no left or right.
They're united.
They're united.
Post 9/11 America, right?
They're united because
America.
they saw what happened. These are the loved ones. Every family knows someone or suffered directly, and again, it's not like there was an attack across the border, and as Hezbollah was always threatened to do it, and take over. Kiryat Shmona, a town of 20,000 people, or Hamas would have come in and taken over 3 of the kibbutzim and villages and shot it out with the Israeli. That's one thing. That's not what happened. And so for Israelis, and it's their kids who are in this battle. It's not like someone else.
Yeah.
This is a country that right now is united, and as soon as it's over, they'll go right back.
Okay, and blame do the blame game.
Right, and I think I don't want to project, but I think that entire top leadership of the Israeli government, they're going to be out.
I have a
left and right.
Yeah, left and right.
Okay. So I have a question that Israel has a very strong military. There's been skirmishes and battles, close to wars that's happened. They're surrounded by Muslim countries.
Arab countries.
Sorry. And when you look at Hezbollah and all these other groups, they're claiming that they're going to do something, or we're going to get more involved if, they said feet go to the ground, but it's already gone there. They've already gone into Gaza, and things are happening right now as we speak. What's the end game here? So what happens if like the other Muslim, the Arab countries, they unite and decide that they're going to join this? I mean,
right.
What do you think? What are you fearing, or what are you expecting?
Right. So your questions are all terrific. So the reason I said Arab is because Iran is Muslim and not Arab. Mm-hmm. And you see that fault line. Why is Iran, since it's gotten all this billions now, and it sort of diffused America, why did they do this? Because their worst fear was about to come to fruition. Saudi Arabia and the Jewish state were going to make peace.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's something that Iran strategically just couldn't accept.
They were so angry about that.
Yeah.
Right?
They were, because they're competitors with Saudi Arabia, and they hate Jews and the fact that there is a state of Israel. They've proven that many. This is, by the way, the Iranian regime, not the Iranian people. I mean, the Iranian regime calls America the big devil and Israel the little devil. But when they do polls about Iranians, what's the number one country that they love? America. So this is about a theocracy that runs it like a mafia.
So the government, it's a government.
It's the absolute government, theocracy, control from the top. And they see Saudi Arabia as sort of like, with all that oil, and it's right across that water. They want to go into the Gulf. You don't have to necessarily capture it all, but because of if they have the nuclear capabilities and there's no more America in the region, they can bully that region, the Gulf region, into forking over a lot of, we say, bakshish. So
Iran is like North Korea.
I mean, should we see Hezbollah the same way as the Iranian government? Are they equal? Or
they're not equal.
I know that Hezbollah got kicked out of their majority on the legislature side.
They still control Lebanon, unfortunately, tragically.
Hezbollah.
But they are
I'm talking about Iranian government and Hezbollah. Do they all? We have to consider
you have to consider Hezbollah as one of the geopolitical military tipping points of the Iranian regime.
That is what I wanted to
Without the support of the Iranian regime, maybe someday the Lebanese people can take back control of their country, which is now left in ruins primarily because of Hezbollah and the Iranian weakening of the state in order to make their people the number one people. Look what's going on in Iraq now. It's, again, weaken it from inside, then have your affiliates become the most powerful. Look, Hezbollah has 150,000 missiles aimed at Israel. They have well-trained troops, much more powerful than Hamas. Now, if Israel had to, it would fight on two fronts. But if that happened, then you're talking about that for sure Iran would feel a military strike. In this case, probably from the United States.
And then do you think Syria would come into picture?
Syria, you have...
How about Turkey, too?
Turkey, too.
Syria,
Turkey said they're not going to
Syria's Assad hasn't been seen in a month. He's hiding.
How about Turkey?
He's still...
Erdogan
is a major player. I've met him on 2 occasions.
Oh, you did? Okay.
He sees himself as a world actor. He knows how to play NATO nations off against Russia and vice versa. He knows how to use the refugee issue in order to pressure European countries. He absolutely sees himself as a major player by, until now, backing Hamas, but also the fact that, with Israel, it just depends on how the wind is blowing and which street he's trying to influence in a particular day. But he is a major regional, and you might say even international player, no question.
Do you believe if President Trump was still in office, this would not have happened? Because it seems like many people will believe that, even in the Ukraine and Russia war would not have happened because Trump showed force and he was friendly. He was, at least on the picture, he was friendly with like Kim Jong-un, these dictators. Putin.
I think
I just wanted to know your opinion on that.
The President Trump and his very astute Secretary of State, Pompeo,
Michael Pompeo,
who's an amazing personality. He's, of course, one of the few Republicans not running for president right now. But by showing strength and drawing lines that for the smaller players, it works. Mm-hmm. And when you want to be like a nice guy, it's taken in a completely different way by the bullies.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that President Biden and Secretary of State Blinken now taking a look in retrospect about the Iranian policy was folly. Mm-hmm. And if they default back to it, it means there'll only be more military confrontations.
Trump got rid of Qasem Soleimani, right?
Correct.
Qasem Soleimani. Can you kind of explain to our viewers about why he did that? Because many people think, some people think that, why did Trump do that?
Soleimani was the chief. He was sort of the head of all the terrorist efforts that were orchestrated by Iran, including the attacks on Americans in the region. And yes, he was involved in plotting sort of mini wars and attacks against Saudi Arabia and threats against Israel. And yes, knowing that you have Hezbollah and others that you can play with, he was, you might say, the godfather of terrorism. Mm. And President Trump just decided to take him out. And that's exactly what he did. That sends the type of message to tyrants, big and small, saying, well, maybe we don't want to mess with this guy. And, maybe the North Korean leader didn't quite understand. He met with him once or twice, but never could really wrap his, who is this guy? And how come? I met with him twice, but I still don't quite, he's really unpredictable. Mm-hmm. So the combining of predictability, of projecting force,
like a madman tactic, right? You
don't know
what he's gonna do.
It's actually the madmen that are saying, "Oh, well, give me the book on it. Like, what's he going to do?" Yeah. Well, we don't know. Yeah. If you don't know, that's going to give the true madmen reason to pause. And
is he really going to do it? Yeah. I don't know. Let's not mess with it.
Because many people thought that he would attack North Korea too when he had all those ships around North Korea, and I mean, I think a lot
Yeah,
of...
he sent, he understood, and the U.S. military still understands to this day how to send a message. Look, when President Biden was confronted with October 7th and you started hearing the stuff coming from Hezbollah and Iran, he still had the U.S. Navy to deploy. Having that strength means that there's actually some hope that there'll be a day after, that there won't be perpetual war. It may be counterintuitive to a lot of younger people who are thankfully born in the 21st century. They don't know anything about regional wars. They hear terrible stories from their grandparents or great-grandparents. They see the newsreels. But thankfully, when you don't feel it, you say, well, we need... I mean, you serve in the military if you're in South Korea.
Yeah.
Same thing with Israel. It's
Israel too.
It's
Both
basically
female and male, right?
It's
they're drafting people from here too, right?
I
No,
don't
I think
know. Right
isn't
now,
it volunteer?
Oh, is it volunteer?
I think it's
right
kinda
now
like a
it's
volunteer
volunteer,
thing.
but there is talk about maybe reinstituting a draft.
Oh,
but
right now there. Okay.
Right now there
there is no
it
draft.
doesn't exist. And then when you take a look at the so-called domino theories, you think the people in Taiwan are sleeping better tonight?
No, I think they're really freaked out. I think a lot of Taiwanese are freaked out about this.
So
whole
what I'm like, the first thing I'm thinking when I see this go out is that I'm not really concerned. I'm not really worried for the Israeli military, because they're very strong. They've proven themselves.
IDF is
once
like
and once
top
again.
7, I think. One of
Took
them.
land from Egypt as it was attacked first, and then gave it back. That was a very nice sign. I think that was, but once like other Arab countries get involved, and if they do get involved, then North Korea is also linked with Iran. So is Russia, and you see sort of
North Korea is already involved.
You believe that North Korea is
No,
already
they sort of are, because that's why I mentioned the paratrooper or whatever theory.
Sometime in the next couple of days, I hope there'll be an op-ed that I co-authored about North Korea and Hamas.
Mm-hmm.
Can we get a little preview of this op-ed?
Yeah.
I mean, you can probably give it to me when you're looking at some of the armaments that they use, the weapons that were deployed by Hamas, and also North Korean leaders have been openly proud, going back to the Six-Day War, where they had North Korean pilots flying, in Egypt and elsewhere. So. There is something about the tyrants who lead
like
North
each other.
Korea that there's something about them that they really don't like the Jewish state at all.
But
maybe because it's also pretty much against the law to be a believer in North Korea. If you're a Christian these days, that makes you almost automatically an enemy of the state.
Even in America these days, if you're a Christian, you're an enemy of the state.
and for some, for some, but
like nuclear weapons, right? I think they have some kind of a program together. North Korea and Iran.
Obviously with the missile,
best buddies.
the developments of the missiles, but also I was involved in debriefing some of the North Koreans who were involved in the poison gas program, who gassed political prisoners. Mm-hmm. I debriefed 2 of them in Seoul on 2 different occasions. So their involvement with Iran, Iraq, Syria, developing more lethal gas and et cetera, that goes back already decades. But I think it runs a lot deeper now, and we'll see more of that, I think, coming out in the coming weeks and months.
So mentioning Taiwan, do you think that China could pull a sneaky one? While everyone's
that's what everybody's worried about.
Xi Jinping
actually
says, "All right, let's go."
And a lot of military experts have been predicting that Taiwan might be attacked
Right.
by
So,
China. But
in Jewish tradition, of course, we have the Jewish prophets going back in the Bible, right? But our rabbis taught us that after the destruction of Solomon's temple, we lost the ability to prophesy. In fact, they say only fools prophesy.
so we don't need to.
You're asking
if it's going to happen, it's going to happen.
No, but I think that you just look at previous behavior, and I think it's not so much of sneaking in; it's a matter of analyzing. Mm-hmm. How did America actually respond? And again, I think that she was shocked when the United States sent the Navy. Surprised when they put more boots on the ground in the region. That's really what they're looking at. Is the U.S. just become the paper tiger? And he's been weak in so many ways, and the Iranians took him to the cleaners. But now looking at this,
are you surprised by Biden? Are you kind of?
I'm relieved.
Relieved.
I'm relieved.
That would be a more correct answer.
That was that explained it. Okay.
So I want to talk about the formation of Israel when it came back in 1948. I don't know whether Rabbi Cooper, whether Jews talk a lot about this, but we know.
Well, we do talk a lot. That's for sure, about everything.
So we believe. I believe that if it wasn't for the rich people, Jews in Great Britain, like the Rothschilds, Israel would not have come. I think they had to deal with United Kingdom government.
Did they have involvement with the Zionists?
They loaned them money, and in exchange of that, have a holy land. And we had a collective. It
sounds to me more like the 1001 Arabian Nights.
Yeah, I want to know. I mean,
honestly, if you want to understand,
I want to know whether the Rothschild family still has a lot of influence over Israel, because the Balfour Declaration, the letter was sent from Balfour.
The Balfour Declaration was just a few days ago, the anniversary.
There was an anniversary. There was an anniversary.
1917.
Who was the receiver of that letter, the Balfour Declaration, right? Who did it?
I don't remember who the letter went to, but it became a public. It was a public document. It was not a secret document.
Exactly. So I wanted to know. I wanted to hear from.
I'm happy to answer your question and try to keep a straight face at the same time.
Okay.
Because I'm not big into conspiracies.
All right.
To understand what makes Jewish people tick, is you need to open up their prayer book. And no matter where, I was just in Tokyo, I've been in Azerbaijan, I've been in Indonesia, I've been all over the world. If you open up a Jewish prayer book, okay, that's really our kind of spiritual passport.
Jewish prayer book.
The Jewish prayer book. And in our prayers, many, many times, 3 times a day, we prayed about the return to Zion. Because for almost 2,000 years, we were scattered all over the world before Google, before cell phones, before international travel, before anything. And so you have, let's say, when I was in Azerbaijan and you had the mountain Jews in Azerbaijan that were isolated for a couple of hundred years, a Turkic group. And back in 1972, when I went to the Soviet Union, I walked into their synagogue. I didn't know the language. I couldn't understand one word they were saying because they were talking some derivative of Turkish. I'm a guy born in Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn,
Okay?
New York. Okay.
I studied in Israel. I'm sitting in their synagogue. I have no idea what they're talking about. I have nothing in common with them until they open the Holy Ark. They bring out the 5 books of Moses. They open up the scroll, and they're reading the exact same part of the scriptures that every synagogue in the world is reading. Mm-hmm. So if you want to understand the bigger picture, like before we get to the Rothschilds and Lord Balfour and all of the political Zionism, is you had a commitment of Jews all over the world, even if it meant it wasn't going to be for them or their kids or even their grandchildren, a firm commitment that someday Jews would go home. Even though there were always Jews living in the Holy Land throughout that 1900 years, the majority were outside. And so, yes, the political Zionism, which began in the 19th century, began to create a sort of framework for people to go home. And there were already mostly poor Jews, some of whom who walked from Ukraine or walked from from Algeria or whatever, literally walked back to the Holy Land. But the political framework came in the 1800s and later on the beginning of the 20th century, late 1800s, early 1900s, Herzl, the whole formation. But by the 1930s, you had already 600,000 Jews living
I know.
In
There were
the land of Israel.
A whole bunch of immigration happening.
But when you talk
prior to
about a promise, yes, the original promise sounded like that the Jewish people would be able to reclaim the entire Holy Land, which, by the way, includes most of Jordan. And so when 47 came, that was taken away by the UN. But even before then, when in the 30s, when the Jews were desperate, they saw what Hitler was about to do. And they were offered by Lord Peel, also a British thing, just a small slither from Haifa to Tel Aviv.
Mm-hmm.
The Jews accepted it. The Arabs rejected it.
So, I mean,
So the idea of, and I just came from Japan, you know, if you ask many Japanese, oh yes, is Jewish bankers very powerful? They helped us then.
I didn't. When I talked about it, I'm not talking it in a demeaning way or anything.
No.
But when I talk about because it's in the history books and I see
when I go to
Narita,
when I get off the plane in Narita, now I go to Haneda. But when I used to get off the plane in Narita all those years, I wanted them to give me a kind of cape that said Super Jew. Because you would meet people and they say, "Oh, you're Jewish, so powerful, etc."
I mean,
I like cutting through
all
the nonsense and dealing with reality.
I wanted to know because I
some
think
of
the
these
Rothschild
conspiracy theories end up being real.
I mean, when the name is there, it's not conspiracy theory, and I'm just mentioning it. That since its name
it was
is
there. It's not a conspiracy.
So
It
it's not a
happened, so
conspiracy theory. So it's a very focal, very integral person. I mean, family. You know, very historical family.
God. Thank God for that family because they also help people.
And then when you mention
poor
about
people
it,
resettle.
I hear a lot from. I have a lot of Jewish friends and Christian friends and atheist friends, Gentiles, Jews, all of them, and they all want to tiptoe around it. They don't want to talk. Even my Jew friends, you know, they don't want to talk about the Rothschilds. I get that reaction a lot. So that's why I just wanted to... why is it so difficult for us to talk about?
You can talk about the Rothschilds. What I loved about the Rothschilds was that when it counted, when poor Jews who had no rights were making their way back to the land of Israel, they had to create something that would sustain them. So you had... vineyards and other economic efforts to give people some chance to create the basis for Jewish people to come home. The fact that Jews who had a lot of money contributed for that effort, God bless them and God bless their memory.
Why not Israel just, kind of have some kind of memorial day for him and for their family? I mean, I was just wondering whether they have those or it's just completely,
No, because I'll explain why. And this is another secret about the Jews, okay?
I want to know all the Jew secrets.
Yes, but the most important secret, it's going to be disappointing. We don't have Memorial Days for bankers.
Okay. No.
We have Memorial Day. Yeah. No, we have Memorial Days for people who bring ideas to the world that make a difference.
I understand.
That's what we revere. And we're glad that there are rich bankers to help us.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not demeaning at all. I'm just actually, talking about some historical facts.
All right. We have about a minute left on the show program, but I just wanted to know, in your opinion, do you think the EU or England could have done things better in 1940?
So the British had the mandate in Palestine. They did about as well in Palestine as they did all the other places around the world that they controlled. They really screwed everything up. They didn't belong there, but they were there for a few decades. But when it counted, when the Jews had nowhere to run from Hitler, even though Hitler was trying to destroy England, and they blocked the Jews from coming in. And so that's the other lesson, is that the Jewish people didn't go through all of this in order to go hat in hand to the UN or the EU or anyone else. Please, talk to Hamas and tell them that they should never do it again. That was really maybe for 1900 years, no more.
Yeah, Rabbi Cooper, how can our viewers see your work? Your
well,
article,
first of all, I want to invite your your wonderful show to come and do a program at the Museum of Tolerance in West LA.
I've been there.
You've been there?
Yes, when I was in high school.
I've been there too.
And
Yeah,
it
there's
was
a
a
lot
very
of-
powerful memory that I had.
Right, and there is a lot of stuff that's changed since then. We'd love to have you come by.
I would love to be there, sir.
And yeah, if you want to, you can go to wiesenthal.com, check the Twitter or the X file, and you'll see how we respond to issues of the day. And yeah, when you come by the next time, maybe I'll tell you about my conversation with Elon Musk.
That's great. We'll be looking forward to that. Thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today.
you
very
for
much,
giving me
Rabbi
the
Cooper.
opportunity to have your community hear directly from us.
Got it.
All right, thank you very much for joining us. 다음에 뵙겠습니다.
Yeah. Thank you.